Final countdown. There we go. All right. It is 7:45 a.m. Let us begin this iteration of BlueTech Global Connect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Klassen. I'm the Executive Director of TMA BlueTech. And I want to welcome everyone to our monthly BlueTech Global Connect webinar. Today's topic is Seafood for the Future, Promoting Industry and Conservation. We have again arranged for a fantastic panel today. The moderator for today's discussion is going to be Dr. James Doherty. He's the co-founder and director of Plastic Eye. And your presenting companies are going to be Dr. Amos Barkai. He's the CEO and co-founder of OLSPS Group. We also have Shayan Haque, the North American Business Development Manager for Offshore Renewables and Geosciences at iXblue. And then we have Greg Murphy, the Corporate Development and Strategic Partnerships Director at Blue Nalu. So before I hand this over to James, and for those who do not know, TMA BlueTech is a San Diego, California-based nonprofit. We promote sustainable science-based ocean and water technologies. Our tagline is BlueTech, promoting BlueTech and Blue Jobs. We're based on the triple helix, which brings together academia, policy, and industry to further the cause of sustainable blue tech. And our three areas of focus are economic development, business ecosystem development, and national and international outreach. Our 14th annual BlueTech Week conference will be held in person again this year. It's from November 14th to the 18th. It's one of the world's premier BlueTech conferences where we bring together quite a fascinating array of high-level professionals from around the world to talk about the state of BlueTech through the lens of academia, industry, and policy. Our agenda this year is looking really fascinating, one of the best yet. So I'll include a link in the chat box for those who want more information. If you'd also like to follow TMA on LinkedIn, I'll also put the link to that in our chat box. We're recording the webinar today, so for those of you who would like to reference this conference afterwards, you'll find it on our YouTube channel within 24 to 48 hours of the conclusion of this event. Finally, a few housekeeping topics. Our presenters will have 10 minutes each to present. At the 9-minute mark, a signal will be given that 1 minute is remaining. Other than this, James will facilitate the discussion, especially the Q&A at the end, and we'll have about 30 minutes for discussion. If you have a question to ask, just write it in the chat box and we will make sure it is asked during Q&A. So with that, I would like to hand the table over to James. James, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt. And welcome everybody to what I think is going to be a really interesting session today. I applaud you all for your commitment joining at this early hour if you're on the west coast of America. So well done. We're at about 10 to 4 in the afternoon here in the UK. So a very civilized time when everybody's stopping for their cup of tea. A really fascinating discussion on topic today. So we're really looking forward to kind of getting stuck in here. Thank you to Matt and to Danielle for the opportunity to contribute today. So I will share my screen. May I just check that that's gone to full screen? If anybody can give me a quick shout.
Yes, it has. You're
excellent. Good. Thank you very much. Okay, so to begin the session today, we will introduce you to Plastic Eye. We are an award-winning UK-based startup, and we are seeking to solve marine pollution using technology, space technology, satellite technology in particular. So our mission is to stop plastic from flowing into the ocean, to protect human and aquatic health, and to safeguard the marine environment for future generations. Our method of achieving this is that we use satellite data to provide government agencies and other key stakeholders with powerful, actionable data on marine plastic and other kinds of pollution. The problems of plastic pollution in the ocean, I think, are very widely promoted and understood at this point. We know that there is huge volumes of plastic flowing into the ocean each day, and that if we continue at the current rate, we are going to be pulling more plastic than fish from the sea by 2050. So that is obviously quite cogent for our discussions today, on something to really focus the minds, I think. Now, this plastic is obviously being degraded when it enters the ocean. It breaks into small pieces, and it is being consumed by marine life. It enters the food chain and it ends up on our dinner plates if you're a fish eater or a pescatarian. So we're not only polluting our oceans with plastic, but we're also polluting ourselves as well. The other really important aspect to the ocean plastic pollution issue is the role it plays in greenhouse gas emissions. At the moment, about 6% of fossil fuels are being used to manufacture plastics, and it's estimated that's going to be increasing to about 20% by the year 2040, which is obviously going to provide big challenges in meeting various commitments to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So it's critical that we find ocean plastic in order to define the best evidence-based policies to tackle the issue, to locate and clean up sources of pollution, and then to boost that cleanup efficiencies. But the ocean is huge, so finding debris at scale is a significant challenge. To face up to this significant challenge, the UN has recently passed a resolution committing its member states to entering a legally binding treaty on plastics by 2024. And this will cover the full life cycle of plastic from production to its leakage into the environment. And the focus there will be to end plastic pollution. For us as a company, this actually produces an interesting market opportunity, as governments are going to be responsible for baselining and reducing their plastic pollution. They're going to be duty bound by this treaty and wish to avoid any penalties under it. And being, government bodies should have significant budgets for sustainability initiatives. And that is why Plastic Eye is setting itself up as a business to government, a B2G offering, at least in its early stages. So the good news is that plastic can be detected using satellites, and this was proven by our colleague Lauren Bierman in 2020 in a paper she published in Nature Journal. And she used the Sentinel-2 satellite, which you can see in this image. So that is a European Space Agency-owned satellite, and it has 10-meter resolution. And she found that it can be used to detect floating debris, and we're talking about microplastics here, so really accumulations of microplastics on the open ocean. So this is what a Sentinel-2 image looks like. It is, as I said, 10 by 10 meter resolution, and this is Da Nang province in Vietnam. If we apply an atmospheric correction to this image, which is in the optical, so this is essentially what we can see with our eyes, we can see some really nice features and currents being exposed in the ocean there. But we're a little bit more interested in what's happening around the coast here. And if we play a neat little trick, what we can do is, instead of looking at this in the full range of the visible, we can look at a specific wave band, and we can look at this in the near infrared. And if we do that, we see that the ocean turns black because it's strongly absorbing in the near infrared. But some other features that are floating on the surface actually reflect and come up quite white. And if we look at this particular circle, the second on the left, we can see lots of floating platforms. And these are platforms which are used for fishing, even living on. And they are generally constructed of plastic and wood. But what does this debris look like when it's on the open ocean? It tends to look something like this. So this is an accumulation of debris to give you a sense of scale. This is a 10 by 10 meter pixel. Yeah, because you get these fronts in the ocean where currents converge, where you might get differences in salinity and temperature. These provide kind of barriers along which debris accumulates. And what we can do is we can play the little trick, the neat trick, where we look at this at different regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. And that allows us to formulate some indices. So these are basically metrics that are optimized to allow us to see things like vegetation, to see other types of debris, including plastic, in these images. And what this looks like in practice, this is an image of the Isle of May, just off the coast of Scotland, near Edinburgh, taken in 2018. Again, this is a Sentinel-2 image on the left, and you can see, yeah, in the optical, we can't see too much. We can perhaps see a bit of a front along the ocean here. But then if we look in the near infrared again, and specifically using this floating debris index, which we have formulated, then we see this feature emerges. And this is a long slick of debris within the box. It's about 2 kilometers long. And yeah, it is revealed in using these techniques, which we otherwise wouldn't be able to see in the optical. In particular, you'll see some real hotspots within the feature, and these are pixels which have a very high likelihood of containing plastic. And what we haven't shown actually in this slide is that the feature actually extends by another number of kilometers. So it's, you know, it was actually approximately a 10-kilometer long feature. So that was a quite considerable volume of debris. So what can we use this kind of information for? We hope that it can inform good policy decisions, to inform interventions, cleanup operations, which are put into effect. Then we can then use this to measure the efficacy of those interventions, which, all being well, will lead to some good news stories in this field, which are much needed. So just a little bit about us.
James. Sorry, we have about a minute, good sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, just a little bit about us as a company. We're quite young still. We're within our first year of operation. We formed in October last year, winning a Hack the Planet competition, which was run by the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Satellite Catapult here in the UK. That's provided us with some funding and computing power to start developing our software. And that's really much been the focus over the last number of months. And we did launch our first prototype last month. And that is currently in the process of being user tested and being used as we're onboarding our first customers and clients. The coming months, we will be working hard on our minimum viable product, seeking to launch that later in the year. And again, with a view to really, you know, fast iterations, fast development, and really making a product people want to use. And then, of course, in the new year, we'll be focusing on all important funding and expansion of the team, and making sure we've got really good infrastructure within the company to grow. So thank you very much for your attention. It's greatly appreciated. If you do want to get in touch, our contact details are on the slide there. But without further ado, I'll pass on to our first main speaker of the morning / afternoon, and I'll hand over to Amos. Thank you very much. I think you're muted currently, yes. Amos.
No, I just unmuted myself, and I will share my screen shortly.
Good.
And I will bring up my screen. I will put it on the first slide, hopefully. All right, good. Good morning, good evening on my side. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to represent us as a group and our technology. The name of my company is OLSPS. We have offices in Portugal and in Cape Town. We are operating for about 30 years. We are a data technology company and with a special focus to the marine environment. And within the marine environment is a special focus on fisheries, quantitative management of fish resources. And the topic of my presentation will be the complexity of fisheries management and the technology that we developed and deployed in order to manage some of the issues associated with fisheries management. This is just a picture of part of the team. The first meeting we had after Corona, physical meeting we had after Corona. We are presently operating still on the cloud with very little physical interaction. We might change it in the future, but right now we are operating all the cloud in the entire company is cloud-based basically. So fisheries is an extremely complex, I would dare to say the most complex commercial activity that need to be managed on the face of Earth. I sometimes say in the entire and the most complex system in the entire universe. And I will try to explain why. So start with human interaction. Fisheries is complex, is in addition to be complex politically and biologically, is very complex in terms of the politics and the social interaction. And the reason is that we have the fisher, which are really the ones that make their living from the commercial fishing. And they, in order to get license, they need to provide information about the catches, about the catch rate, and about the fishing effort, and all sorts of other data that the scientists require in order to do scientific assessment and to provide scientific advice. And they're doing it, and they provide this assessment and advice to the authorities. The authorities taking the advice and they translate it to regulations that go to the fishers, and then the fisher, the license and their fishing operation need to be driven by their different regulations. The problem is that the fisher do not trust, that the scientists do not trust the authorities do not trust the fishers, and the fishers don't trust any one of us basically. They don't want to be managed, they don't appreciate the scientific work, they don't appreciate the level of understanding that is required for fishery management of the relationship are very complex. In addition, commercial fishing is highly dynamic operation, and let me give you some example. This is, by the way, a vessel that our technology is deployed on in Portugal. So first of all, we have to track the vessel. The vessel movement need to be tracked all the time. We need to know where the vessel is fishing, because they are allowed to fish only in certain area, and they're allowed to have catches only based on the area where they're fishing. In addition, vessel is just one name to many types of fishing vessel with many types of fishing gears. Each one of them need to be determined because it's part of the analysis that we need to do. Of course, there are many fishing methods, possibly potentially tens different fishing methods with many variants that they can make it even hundreds of different fishing methods. Each one of them has different impact on the resource, on the selectivity, on the catchability, you will name it. The fish often don't get to the shore as fish. They've been cut and processed on the vessel. While we're managing the life resource, we're getting the fish only in pieces. And we need somehow to convert or to translate the pieces of boxes of different pieces of fish that we're getting into the life animal, the life creature that they were just days ago. The weather is changing all the time. Weather has huge impact on the availability of fish, on the catchability of the fishing gear, on the ability of the vessel to operate. So all of this also impact our understanding of the resource dynamic and the dynamic of the fishery. Fish life cycle is highly complicated, and fish have different behavior, migration behavior, feeding behavior, interactive behavior, population dynamic in different stages of their life. So while we're catching the adult fish, in this case, some kind of salmon, we actually need to take into account the entire life cycle of the fish. In addition, fish can inhabit different area and different ecosystem, and all of this need to be taken into account when we do assessment of the impact of the fishery on the resource and the ecosystem. So I call it fishery management a juggling act. Basically, everything is moving, and you need to juggle many moving pieces at the same time. The logistic, the environment, the ecological, the production, you name it, everything is moving in fisheries management, and you cannot ignore any of the element, any of the pieces of the dynamic of this system, because each one of them might have a significant impact on your scientific and your management decision. Believe it or not, in this highly complicated system, until recently, most of the data were collected using pieces of paper, different log sheet that the skipper or the observer will write his observation on the data that he need to report. And it's even if only basic information needed to be reported, it was insufficient. But in recent years, there is more and more demand to collect data regarding the ecosystem, the impact on other species, on other marine species. And of course, there is no way that you can fit all the information and all the data that we need for management on such piece of paper. And that's where we come in. So my first attempt into changing the game was started about 20 years ago, when I said that we need to change this way of collecting fishing data to this way of collecting fishing data. It's mean a modern tool to data management, data collection, data analysis, which include everything that we have right now in data technology. So we developed a system, and the project that I'm talking to you is just a project that was funded recently by the EEA, a funding body in Europe, which is basically to try to take the system that we started to develop 20 years ago and to bring it into the Portuguese commercial fleet. And we developed two basic units. We developed a unit which you call a vessel unit, or the OLRAC dynamic data logger, OLRAC DDL, doesn't matter where the name comes from. And our vision is that the unit will be able to collect any type of information. It be video, it will be text, it will be number, it will be sensor information, include anything that's important, because visually, as I just explained, all these different elements have impact on fishery decision. Then we develop a shore system that can take the information from many vessels and can aggregate them together in order to make management analysis of the stock as a whole and the ecosystem as a whole. And then this analysis can be provided to the compliance authority, to the scientific management, to the commercial user themselves, and of course for marketing, etc. And there is exchange of data, real-time exchange of data between the vessel unit, between the many vessel unit to the shore unit. And I will explain later why this real-time is very important and very relevant in fisheries management. We also incorporated AI technology assisted capabilities into our tools. We did something which is relatively unique. We basically allowed the fisher to deploy and apply the AI tool that we developed directly. I cannot explain now why it's important, but the main thing is that we need basically thousands, tens of thousands of images in order to train the AI tools to do species recognition or to do any type of image processing. So we developed 3 tools that allow the user to collect the images from his from the vessel using integrated camera that we also developed. And we now allow the user to analyze and to label the species, to do a catch estimation of how much he caught, and to do event estimation, all using the footage that was collected by the onboard camera that's sitting on the vessel. So just an example to the type of technology that we can use, the type of management decision that we can do in real time. Here we have a situation, it was in American fishery, scallop fishery, where there is a bycatch species which is a protected, it's called yellowtail flounder. And this bycatch species, once he caught, they're not allowed to carry on fishing their allocated species, which is scallop. So that was causing huge damage to them. and they needed a tool, a real-time tool that will allow them to avoid area where there is a big yellowtail flounder. So we have vessels in this fleet, in the scallop fleet, that are equipped with our vessel unit, and each one of them collect the data that you collect in the unit, whatever these data are. Among them is the CPUE or the catch rate or the index of how much yellowtail flounder, which is the bycatch, the protected bycatch, each of one of them got in his net. And this information is going into our shore system in some kind of computer language, of course, in real time. And this information is then aggregated, analyzed and aggregated in real time on the shore unit. And it creates a unit, it creates a map. And this map is very simple. It's just showing to the fishers where are areas, let's call them the red area, where there was high level of bycatch in the catches. So they can see that the red point is area that yellowtail flounder occur in large quantity and should be avoided. This information is then sent directly in real time based on certain rules or manually or based on certain rule automatically to the vessel. All the vessels of the fleet then get a message on their unit that there is a message coming to them so that they need to read. It's urgent, so they get the signals that you can see on the simulation, on the simulator. And then all of them get the map, the same map, that the aggregated map. This map don't give any information about the hotspot, the area where fishing was good or not good, just about the area where there was a lot of bycatch that should be avoided. And now they can arrange their fishing operation around this area and to avoid the catch of bycatches.
Amos, you have about
this
a
is
minute,
just,
sir.
yes.
Amos,
Yeah, I almost finished. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is really just an example of how the kind of technology can save a lot of money to the fishers. At the same time, dramatically improve the management of fish resources and the ecosystem of these fish resources. And just from time, I want to thank you all. I could talk about a few more hours about other elements of our technology, but I will leave it to another opportunity. I appreciate your attention. And if anybody wants to talk to us anytime, please call us or visit our website, as you see here. And I'd like to use the last few seconds to again thank the EA for their contribution, for the funding for this project, and to the different partners of this particular project that are listed below. Many thanks to everybody.
Great talk, Amos. Really enjoyed that. And I can see anybody that's involved in AI, their eyes lighting up at your fish classification possibility. So I'm sure we'll have a few questions on that. Brilliant talk. Moving on now to Shayan of iXblue, who's going to give us an introduction to his project and company as well. Over to you, Shayan.
Thank you, James. I'm just going to share my screen. Yes, I hope you can all see my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming through now.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And special thank you to Danielle, Matt, and TMA BlueTech for giving us this opportunity to speak this morning. I think this is a very timely and appropriate discussion to be having, given what iXblue has been doing recently in the maritime world. So I'll speak to that today. For those of you who don't know iXblue, I'll give a very quick company overview. And then, as you'll see, we do many different activities and in many different markets. We also develop many different solutions, but today I'm here to specifically talk about our CPIX volumetric echo sounder for fisheries assessment and classification, as well as a unmanned surface vehicle that could be used to do a lot of the work autonomously, especially fisheries assessment. So iXblue, we're a French technology developer. We have been around for, as a iXblue, we have been around for about 20 years, but iXblue essentially is a conglomeration of several companies in France working on different technology developments, such as acoustics, inertial navigation, sonar, fisheries classification, shipbuilding, and it's essentially a conglomeration of all of these companies into one. We're about 750 people now globally. We're about 11 offices worldwide. We have 2 offices in the United States, one in Denver, Colorado, and one in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And the way we think of ourselves in the markets that we play in are in 3 categories. One is autonomy technologies. That includes autonomous solutions in the marine world, as well as autonomous cars, autonomous trucks, aerial drones, etc. We make solutions for pretty much all of those platforms. Sea technologies, that essentially encompasses all our sensor platforms that we have developed, as well as the software solutions that we provide with the hardware, as well as photonics. And photonics is a large world for us. iXblue as a company, we develop everything ourselves, starting from the raw material, including fiber optic cables, amplifiers, modulation solutions. Those then go into our own sensor and vehicle platforms. So we build everywhere from specialty fibers. So the photonics is essentially serving clients that are in the world of lasers and photonics in that kind of a market. We build inertial navigation systems for ships, surface vehicles, subsea vehicles like submarines, AUVs, ROVs, etc. Sonar solutions, so that the CPIX is essentially a sonar technology that I'll speak about, that's specifically for fisheries. We also have a shipyard in the south of France where we used to develop hydrographic survey vessels based on this composite hull that we hold a patent to. But since then, we have evolved into making only autonomous platforms, which is called the DRIX. And lately, we have added a whole category for artificial intelligence, which really is serving to develop the brains for our sensor platforms and autonomous vehicles. So I kind of briefly touched upon that earlier. We play in many different markets, but we started in the world of marine and maritime world. So we're very, very familiar with that market, but since then we have evolved into many others, mostly into energy and renewables, space. So the gyro compasses and inertial navigation systems that we build for our autonomous platforms, surface vehicles, subsea vehicles is essentially adapted for gyroscopes for space satellites. We of course has presence in the defense world, given some of the sensor technologies that we develop, as well as in fisheries, science, and autonomous platforms like autonomous vehicles and navigation. So the CPIX, it's a 3D multi-beam echo sounder. Some of you, I'm sure all of you are familiar with echo sounders, but it's the algorithms and the software that we have developed around that is targeted for fisheries and biomass assessment. So it consists of 2 Mills-Cross multi-beams with 64 transducers on each side. So it's like 2 antennas, essentially creating a plus-minus 60-degree steerable swath. So basically from port to starboard and from aft to forward direction. So what you really get is a 120-degree cone-shaped area of detection with resolution of about 7.5 to 2.5 centimeter resolution, depending on the water depth. So what it's essentially doing is essentially measuring the water column. And that allows us to detect biomass fisheries in the water column up to 400 meters because we're operating at about 150 kilohertz with a bandwidth of about 10 kilohertz. And it already has a built-in motion reference unit. So it's motion compensated. It also knows its own orientation, and it's pitch stabilized for transmission. So it's a very stable platform. It could be deployed in many different ways. It could be hull mounted to a vessel, to a fishing trawler. It could be mounted from a side pole of a small fishing vessel. So it's a very versatile platform, and not too heavy, can be operated by one or two people. And on the top right, you kind of see the other equipment that comes along with it, with like a surface unit and a topside unit, as well as the data interpretation. And it can also be mounted in many different ways. It does not have to be downward looking. It could be positioned either forward looking, so it can act as a forward looking sonar, or it could be mounted sideways, depending on the type of fisheries that you are looking to detect. So this solution has been around for quite some time. It's actually used pretty regularly and widely in Alaska. We're in quite a few of the ship fisheries trawlers there, as well as in the northeast of Canada, also for fishing applications, as well as in Norway, in Scandinavia. And but we have essentially, because as I mentioned earlier, iXblue owns the technological know-how and the production capability in-house. We have since then adapted the solution, not just for fisheries and biomass detection in the commercial world for commercial fishing, but it's also now used for fisheries research. We're actually working quite a lot with NOAA Fisheries in the East Coast on that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And it's also used for marine construction. So for example, in the East Coast and also in the Asia Pacific, a lot of the jackup rigs are using this on the legs to essentially understand the bathymetry and the environment before they decide to kind of put their foot down, so to speak, and put the pylons down. So they do a bathymetric survey on that. So speaking of bathymetry, even though I've only talked about it from the sense of from fisheries, it's a multi-beam echo sounder that actually is actually doing three things simultaneously. It's doing real-time bathymetry. So bathymetry is the topography of the seabed. It's doing the seabed analysis also. So it has some sub-bottom capability. So it can look below the seabed to understand the composition of the seabed, as well as fish mapping, because it's measuring the water column. And the shoal volume imaging is something that we do working closely with either fishery scientists or researchers in developing some of those platforms. It's like a statistical model that we have developed. So on the top right, what you see is the software that kind of shows the fisheries that's kind of the fisheries biomass that's following the fishing trawler, and you kind of get a sense for the estimation. On the bottom left-hand side, you see the bathymetric image that can be gained from the CPICs, and then in the middle, you see the seabed analysis to understand if it's muddy or rocky or clay, and then the second from the right is the map of the fisheries and the biomass near a ship, and then the one on the right is the shoal volume imaging. And then moving very quickly, I just wanted to touch upon the DRIX. The reason why is because 5 years ago, it was at the TMA event in San Diego in 2017 where we launched this vehicle in the US market. And since then, we have added a lot of capabilities to that. So the DRIX that you see over here is an 8-meter long autonomous platform. And it was developed for hydrographic surveys. But since then, given its open and versatile platform, it has found its application in many other worlds, and I'll speak to that in my next slide. It has a retractable gondola on the bottom, which you cannot see, but it acts as a ballast and also gives it the stability that you see. So the video that you just saw is actually in Sea State 5, working off the coast of France. So it's a very stable environment. It can take any different types of sensors, such as multi-beam, sub-bottoms, USBL solutions, any kind of cameras or LiDAR, whatever that our clients want to put, depending on the application. So it has a lot of wide range of applications and markets. So right now, it's being used quite extensively in the offshore renewable space for bathymetric survey, hydrographic survey, a lot of surveillance near and around ports. And in the fisheries world,
we have about a minute left. Good
okay, thank you. So the last point that I wanted to make is that we are actually working with the NOAA Fisheries, New England Fisheries Science Center, where we have integrated the CPICs on the DRIX to do fisheries and biomass assessment in and around wind farms or future wind farms. So last summer, we did this survey in the Block Island Wind Farm, which right now is the only operating wind farm in the East Coast. And then this winter, we are going back to a future wind farm site to understand what the biomass looks like pre-construction, because that's kind of what NOAA is up to. They're curious to understand how the marine construction and the construction of monopiles affect the fisheries and biomass in that area. So as you can see, it has many different applications, and preferably applications in the fisheries and biomass world as well. That was a very, very quick rundown of what we do. This presentation I will share with TMA, and so if you're curious to learn more, there are some videos that might give you a little bit of an idea of the world that we play in, based on the technology and some more details on the CPICs as well as the DRIX. So with that, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shayan. That was a really fascinating whistle-stop tour through some of the technologies at iXblue, and some good questions coming in on that as well. So yeah, we'll look forward to asking those in the question and answer session. Without further ado, we'll go on to our final talk of the afternoon before the Q&A session of the morning, sorry. And we've got Greg Murphy from BlueNalu, and he is presenting on cell-cultured seafood, which I am most fascinated to hear. So, Shayan, if you're able to stop sharing your screen, that will enable Greg to jump on.
Thanks, James. And while Shayan's switching screens, it's great to see everybody. Lots of familiar faces, so it's great to be among friends and good company, all focused on blue tech and blue economy. And huge thanks to Danielle and Matt and TMA BlueTech. This is such an incredible community, incredible forum. So really appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Greg Murphy. I'm Director of Corporate Development and Strategic Partnerships at BlueNalu. We are a San Diego-based startup focused on a new way to seafood. Something that many people may not have ever heard of. We see ourselves as the third leg in a three-legged stool of production of seafood. So today you have wild, you have farmed. In the future, you're going to have this third category called cell-cultured seafood. And that's where BlueNalu has established a global leadership position as the lead in developing cell-cultured seafood. It's not anywhere available on the market today, but our mission is to be the leader in the future, and we're working hard towards that. We essentially produce real seafood directly from cultured fish cells of target marine species. And I'll go into a little bit more about our species selection in a little bit. But this is all meant to increase the overall supply of seafood for humanity, while also supporting the biodiversity and sustainability of our ocean. Many people are familiar with the United Nations and their Code Red for Humanity, which calls on urgent action to address various issues related to climate change, global gas emissions, ocean sustainability. The fact is that 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions is a result of the food system, while at the same time the ocean actually absorbs about 1/3 of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions through natural systems. And as a result, there are communities that are promoting the idea of blue food, and so moving away from red meat towards blue foods, which is to include all species, all production sustainably of seafood coming from aquatic sources, and otherwise. So we see ourselves totally aligned with the blue foods movement. However, there's a significant lack in the blue food supply. Seafood consumption is already at an all-time high on a global basis. The UN is projecting a need for 28 million tons of new seafood by 2030. While many people understand, particularly folks from OLSPS, that the amount of seafood coming out of the wild capture fishery has remained flat since the 1990s and has reached 90% of their maximum sustainable yield. At the same time, aquaculture is coming online very quickly, but will continue to be limited based on limited availability of the space, based on limited species that can be farmed. Remember, not all species have had a closed life cycle, so there's a small handful of species that can be farmed, and there's issues related to resource efficiency. So we see that the world needs a new solution for seafood, and that Blue Nile is part of that solution. So what do? We pick a species, we source that species, and then we extract the highest quality cells from that fish. And we're able to feed those cells in a very clean environment in what's called a bioreactor, a mixture of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, sugars, and salts, and other ingredients to increase the overall volume of cells in that bioreactor. So when we have a very large volume, you see here in step 3, we're able to spin those down into forms that consumers are familiar with, like a fillet or like a poke cube or a piece of sashimi for sushi, for sashimi grade entrees. And that's been very exciting. I think Amos touched upon the complexity of the seafood industry today. This is a chart that really highlights that in simple terms. It's very fragmented. Seafood is the largest traded protein on the planet. It's very vulnerable to the changing ocean conditions, vulnerable to the microplastics that Plastic Eye is trying to address, vulnerable to pathogens, contaminants in the ocean, radiation. And then once it gets into the supply chain, there's a tremendous amount of waste from bycatch, from food spoilage, from the fact that seafood is being transported thousands of miles away from capture to source, from source capture to consumption, with many steps in between. Blue Nile represents an opportunity to totally vertically integrate that seafood supply chain. So the target species we're focused on are primarily imported into various nations. So we're able to have local production and are also not farmed. And so we're really targeting those difficult to source, those highly unsustainable fisheries, those fisheries that might have challenges related to personal health, like mercury or microplastics to a greater extent. And we've interviewed a tremendous amount of chefs and food service operators and consumers who tell us that seafood is enjoyed, seafood is wanted, but there's not enough supply. There's a lack of consistency, not only in the availability, but also the pricing. The fact that there is a lot of food waste, 40 to 60% of the fish is used, the rest is considered waste, can sometimes be ground up for feed, but that also is very inefficient. And so what Blue Nile represents is the opportunity to provide 100% yield with reduced risk on personal health from mercury and microplastics, for example, and supports the broader biodiversity. In 2019, so as a company, we were originated in 2017, really began operations in 2018. And in late 2019, we unveiled our first prototype and demonstrated, this is actually our product, demonstrated that cell-cultured seafood can perform the same exact as conventional seafood in all cooking applications, whether it's cooked, served raw like a sushi or sashimi, as a poke cube, can be acidified, can be microwave, frozen, thawed. It performs the exact same as conventional seafood. As I said earlier, we are a San Diego-based company. We are now in our 3rd facility. We started out in a biolabs incubator. Then we expanded into an R&D lab, about 6,000 square feet. And just earlier this year, we moved into the image on this screen, which is our Blue Nile Innovation Center, roughly 40,000 square feet here in San Diego, which will be focused on continued R&D, continued development, product development for new species and new product applications. We've received a tremendous amount of PR, but we're not the only ones in this ecosystem. There's roughly over 100 companies focused on around the world, focused on cell culture, whether it's meat, pork, poultry, or seafood. There are a number of startups that are working to address these challenges. We're very excited to understand the deep blue carbon and the opportunity that the ocean, through nature-based solutions, naturally sequesters carbon through various natural systems. We believe that leaving large fish in the ocean will be not only good for the fish, but also good for humanity, because the ocean is so important and provides so many tremendous ecosystem benefits for humanity. We couldn't do this alone. We're heavily invested into strategic partners. From the supply chain ingredients, companies like Nutreco, the world's largest, they own a company called Spreading, one of the world's largest provider of aquaculture feed, is one of our partners, one of our investors. All the way through the R&D, the product development company like Griffith Foods, well known in the product development space for culinary, all the way down to sales, marketing, and distribution as well. So Mitsubishi Corporation and Sumitomo Corporation out of Japan, Thai Union out of Thailand, Pongwan out of Korea, Nomad Foods out of Europe, one of the largest importers of sustainable seafood in Europe, is a very strong partner of ours, and we're so glad. To date, we've received over $84 million. And we specifically, when we first, one of the prompts for this presentation was, what was part of your thinking? Why did you choose to address this particular challenge? And our response to that is, this technology can be used in a wide variety of protein products: beef, pork, poultry, seafood, et cetera, foie gras. We specifically chose seafood because of the fact that seafood is so complex, it's so vulnerable, and also commands premium pricing on the product side. So we're focused on premium, center of the plate, whole muscle forms versus grounded or commodity. For example, we're not focused on salmon because there's a tremendous amount of salmon production, and that's going to continue to increase, hopefully, in the future. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and really appreciate your time.
Hi, Greg. Thank you very much for that presentation. Absolutely fascinating, and it certainly seems like it's a proper solution. So really interested to find out a bit more about that through the questions as well. So if I can ask all our speakers to hop back on and put their cameras and microphones on. I think we got about 25 to 30 minutes to have a bit of a chat. We've had some really good questions coming in through the chat room. Some directed to particular speakers, so we'll maybe pick those up first, and then we've got a couple more kind of generic ones as well. I think coming straight off the back of your talk there, Greg, while we're on the subject, I guess an interesting question, or one of the first that pops up into my head, is just around the price points and how that compares currently, and what kind of movement and efficiencies you're going to have to gain in order to directly compete with fish coming out of the ocean.
Sure, James. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine there's a tremendous amount of intellectual property that goes into this technology. Again, back to the species selection, that's part of the reason why we focus on seafood. It's also part of the reason why we're focused on bluefin tuna, and specifically the Toro portion of bluefin tuna, the belly, the fatty, the delicious, the buttery portion of the bluefin tuna. Today, conventionally, that price point is $60 to $120 US per pound. So it's quite significant. And the process that we've developed is actually, the cost of production is actually lower than that. So we have a strong profitability pathway. Ultimately, it's about large scale production too. So with additional scalability, you'll receive reduction of cost of goods. And we've performed a techno-economic assessment that allows us to do that.
Okay, super. Okay, cool. So a really interesting question came in for Amos, which obviously fishers are quite often quite keen to keep the locations of their fishing spots private and confidential to them. So an interesting question was whether the data collected through your app is available to all users or more widely, or are fishers able to keep their locations to themselves?
Yeah, this is the most common and the most sensitive and controversial issue in fisheries management. We need data from many sources in order to come with advice which is meaningful. Fishers are highly protective of their data. be it the fishing location, the catch. They treat their data as a national security or even more than that. So yeah, the answer is yes. We are we facilitating basically any agreement between the fishers. The data are aggregated and accumulated on our platform. The raw data never shared unless there is a clear agreement to share this data or to make them visible. But the scientific insight or the management insight that come from the analysis can be shared, again, based on the arrangement or the agreement that we have with the Association of Fisher. In this case, what was the scallop fishery on the Northeast Atlantic. And in this case, we were allowed to share the information where there is a high level of yellow flounder bycatch, but we cannot say anything about the catches or the catch rate of the target species, which is a scallop. So, so there is no giving away in any way of where are the hotspots for good fishing, but only where are the hotspots for, let's call it, bad fishing. And that type of rules is applied for other cases as well.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I think there was quite a lot of interest in your camera, which is doing the classification of fish, which seems like a really interesting use of technology and a cool application of AI. There was a couple of questions around that. So one was, could that kind of assist regulators to help to estimate the volumes of catches? Was one question, and another one was, how many different species are you able to identify at the moment, and what kind of algorithms are you using to do that? Is it something like a convolutional neural network? If you're able to share that with us.
Yeah, to the extent of my knowledge, I'm not myself an AI expert, but really, I think what is unique in our AI technology, is the model that we develop rather than the actual technology. The technology of image processing, image recognition is now available in many forms. A lot of it is freely available. What the real challenge is to get the amount of data that need for the training of the model. That's really very complicated, especially in an environment like fishery, where it's very messy environment, and the fish arrive in a big pile of fish, on quite often covered with all sorts of other stuff. So what we did, we transferred this highly sophisticated technology to the hands of the fisher by creating a user interface for the fisher, where when he get the image, we integrated our software with the camera. The images are saved on the camera. We then created an automatic identification of time, of part of images where the tool was taken in critical time. So we not really care about 100 hours of steaming. We care about what happened when around the fishing operation. Then we create a labeling tool for the user. He can take the image and he can mark the fish, because the user, a trained user, can mark the fish very easily, can know which fish he see in the image very quickly. And then we allow him to take the labeling utility, but we did it very, very friendly. You don't need any technical training. And once he labeled the fish, he can feed it into the training model. He can learn the training model, run it. Of course, because this data is on, he accumulating more and more images all the time. The model become more accurate. It then provide the model with a feedback of a positive and negative processing. And this is a loop that allow the fisher over time to take complete ownership of the image recognition and the images that he collected, and to use this for his own use. And yes, of course, for the regulator as well, because this can, for example, support claim about how much he caught, which species he caught, was it discarding from the vessel or not, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, for the explanation, and that. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting application of AI. So I think there's probably a few more queries on that, but we can move on for the moment. Just to ask Shayan a few things about iXblue. There was a a question came in from John Neagley on how long your DRIX can operate autonomously, and what is its typical mission profile?
Yes, no, that's a great question. So I did not mention this in my when I talked about the DRIX. So the DRIX can operate anywhere between 4 knots up to 14 knots. At typical survey speeds, let's say we typically like to do surveys, bathymetric surveys at 8 knots. Again, based on sensor payload, weather conditions, it's about 5 days before there's a need for refuel. So and that's but it can be more if you're going slowly, if you're doing the surveys at a slower speed and sea state conditions. And then if I understand the question about the typical mission profile, it can be operated in many different ways. It can be operated from shore through remote control. There's always a human in the loop, basically looking at the overall health and status of the vehicle and just monitoring the status. But we actually have full remote over the horizon capability over SATCOM. So we're actually doing a mission right now in Northeast Canada in Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, which is a French territory. So about 60 years ago, a fishing vessel sunk in a storm and they have never been able to locate it. And that has been a traumatic experience for that fishing community. That's still predominantly a fishing community. So we did a survey last year and bathymetric multi-beam survey, and we're back again this year for a 60-day survey to keep looking for that vessel. And we're operating at about 8 knots and refueling every 5 days. So that's the kind of numbers that I have right now.
Okay, interesting. That's
we're actually operating it from France. It's remotely operated from our command and control center in France.
Okay. That's an impressive submersion period. There's a question in from my co-founder actually. So, but I think it's an interesting one. Obviously we're Plastic Eye are looking at pollution from above the water. Because of the methods we're using, we're kind of confined to looking at floating debris. But Donald had asked whether CPICS might be able to offer insights into kind of subsurface pollution. Because it could be an interesting way of coupling these data sets, because we know a lot of plastics which does up end in the ocean ends up on the ocean floor. So.
No, that's a great question, because Donnell, when I saw James's presentation at the beginning, that very same thing went through my head as well. So I think it's definitely something we should talk after this. The short answer is yes, because the CPICS is able to locate, is measuring the water column basically from the surface up to 400 meters. So anything below the surface, we can definitely combine the technologies and have a more thorough and informed decision-making, because we can provide the subsea information, and you obviously have the surface information, which we don't. So I think that's a powerful combination.
Let's have a chat. Okay, excellent. Greg, another question for you on your cell cultures. Do you you kind of mentioned that you would always seek to kind of replicate an existing species. Would you consider producing kind of hybrid cell cultures which combine the positive characteristics of different types, so combining taste and nutrition, for example, of different species?
It's a good question. We get similar questions quite often, actually, James. So appreciate that. And it's interesting. So with our production method, there's an opportunity to be demand driven, right? So today seafood is supply restricted. There's a reason why you go to a seafood restaurant or any restaurant with seafood on the menu, and you look at it and it says seafood market pricing or catch of the day. Part of that reason is because they don't know what will be coming off the boats. So there's a demand shift with what we're able to do. And so Blue Nalu, we're not there yet. We're still building. But when we are at large scale and we are focused on multiple species, we have that opportunity to be demand driven. which is a complete paradigm shift within the seafood industry. So to your question more specifically, if there's demand, sure. But unless we see that signal, there's probably not much of a reason.
Okay, cool. That's clear. There's a question directed at Plastic Eye, so I can take a stab at that. So that was, does Plastic Eye plan on working with others that could extract plastic from the ocean? And how do you imagine this would work? That's certainly one of our use cases will be to make ocean cleanup operations more efficient. As you can imagine, the ocean's a very large space, and if you are setting out onto the high seas to with your cleanup kit, it helps to know where to go, and we can certainly be identifying where those accumulations are. What we might also be able to do, or what we certainly think we can do, is really identify where these types of hotspots and accumulations tend to form. So we can see, this might vary with seasonal trends, etc. But we can start to say, maybe at this type of year with these prevailing weather conditions, this is where you tend to get these accumulations, or this is where you tend to get a lot of wash up on beaches after particular storms. So having these predictions for increased cleanup efficiency is definitely part of our roadmap and part of our offering. So that's a good question. Before jumping in maybe to some of the more kind of general questions, which any of the speakers are welcome to take a stab at, there's just another a few quick ones. One for Amos is an interesting one, is whether you keep an eye on any kind of lost fishing gear, because we know kind of ghost gear is a big problem in the oceans as well. So.
Yeah, as I said in the end of my presentation, I just presented very small, relatively very small part of the different application that we develop. One of the applications that we develop, we call it the Marine Observer. We hope to bring it to the market by the end of this year. And the idea is that any observation of any kind will be able to be reported by any seagoer, regardless if you have any technical experience. It is a mobile application. I will have to present it to this team at some stage, to the BlueTech team at some stage. We're working on this for almost 6 years now. And the idea will be that any debris that either been brought up by the net or been found floating the user of this application will be able to report. In addition, our fishery e-log utility that is used on hundreds of vessels can collect that kind of data. We basically allow the user to collect any type of data that either the user want to collect or the authority require him to collect. And in some fisheries, in the other world, if you come across a debris of any fishing gear, you must report it. And our software allow it to collect this information and to provide details on time, location, to take a picture, anything related to the debris.
Excellent. I think that's a really exciting to learn that. It's obviously a really important technology given the scale of the kind of ghost gear problem in the oceans as well. So yeah, definitely one maybe we'd like to have a chat to you about as well. Maybe a related question for Shayan is what is iXblue doing with regards to protection of marine species and kind of other environmental impacts as well, so whether that's ghost gear, or whether it's marine species running into trouble, etc., or migration patterns, these types of things.
No, that's a great question. We actually, as I mentioned very briefly in my presentation, is we have integrated the CPEX into the USB for autonomously detecting fisheries and biomass. We did some detection. We participated in a study with NOAA Fisheries last fall. They were looking at biomass in a post-construction environment. And then what we're going to do in the winter is monitoring cod spawning in the future, November and December. The reason we're able to do that in November and December in the Northeast, even weather gets bad for, let's say, the seas get a little bit more stormy, and but the Drix is able to operate in those conditions. And then in spring of next year, we're going to go back again with NOAA Fisheries, and this time they're going to be looking at right whale monitoring. So in order to do that, we cannot use the CPIX because of its frequency limitations. So what we're going to do is, because the Drix is a it's actually a very quiet data gathering environment, where you put all the sensors on about 2 meters below the surface. It's very quiet, and we have integrated passive acoustic solutions sensors for one of our clients in France, and it's very quiet, that the AM system worked very well. So the idea is to now take it from just integration and be targeted towards right whale monitoring. And it's a very sensitive topic in the East Coast because it's classified as an endangered species. So they're very, very nervous about frequencies and not to disturb them and hit them. So NOAA Fisheries believe that it's a very safe and a reliable method to go with an autonomous platform, which is fast, which can monitor where the whales are going, but can also be quick to kind of get away from it, as opposed to like a large vessel that is more threat for a strike. So we're kind of excited about that. I was actually on a call this morning with NOAA Fisheries, so we're kind of right now in the final planning and stages of that. So that's happening starting in November.
Cool, excellent. Yeah, really nice to know that aspect is being addressed as well. Okay, cool. Just moving on to a few more general questions in our last couple of minutes. I think a really nice one is for the kind of early career professionals who may be here or might watch this video subsequently, is what are your workforce needs? Do you need to have advanced degrees to work in your companies? And are there things people can be doing today to kind of make sure that they are sufficiently upskilled to come and work for your organizations? And please, anybody feel free to take that.
I can go if you want. Our company need both. We need a very highly trained, highly educated people, mathematicians, scientists, but we also need a lot of programmer. And as far as I'm concerned, if it's a teenager that have no degree of whatsoever, but really cool with computer and programming, and we have few of these, so we can employ people with no experience, smart people with no experience for the software development side, but for the more analytical side, yes, we need highly trained people.
Cool.
For us at iXblue, one of the perceptions, as everybody in this panel can understand or have heard at some point, is whenever somebody hears an autonomous platform or an uncrewed platform, they immediately think it's creating like a loss of jobs. We think of it as completely the opposite. We see it as an opportunity to develop a workforce that's going to now, they need to learn how to operate these autonomous platforms, because they might be autonomous, but you still need a human being in the loop for supervision and just overall operation of it. So we actually have signed a partnership with the University of New Hampshire here a few years ago, and we actually just opened a joint facility. We're going to be producing and developing these USVs in America. So that's going to essentially create opportunities to build these autonomous platforms here in the US, and also as a training center, because we really do see a shortage of a workforce that needs to know how to operate these autonomous platforms, and not just to operate, but to maintain them, repair them, service them. And this is something that NOAA for the next 2 years has prioritized, is to create an infrastructure of how to absorb these autonomous platforms in their fleet. But once they receive it, who takes care of them, who operates them, who repairs them? So they're kind of bringing a lot of stakeholders into this discussion, and we're part of that discussion right now with them. So that's kind of what we see from a workforce development.
I'll just add briefly, anybody that's interested, go to bluenalu.com, look for the careers page. We're looking for cell biologists, tissue engineers, food scientists, culinary professionals, quality assurance, quality control, regulator, and that's just currently. So as we continue to grow, we'll get into manufacturing. There's also going to be manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, that's I can see Matt appearing to this. This is probably a point to round things off, but I'd say as well from our perspective, yeah, it's there's a wider range of opportunities that you might just think when you're looking at a high-tech company. So yes, we need the machine learning analysts and the AI specialists, but we also need people with good sales experience, business to government sales experience, and the things like HR and legal advice, etc., which you require as a company grows. So I think there's all sorts of opportunities in and around these blue technology companies. So yeah. Anyway, folks, I'll hand back over to Matt, but it's been a joy speaking to everybody today. Thanks very much for the opportunity, and I hope the conversation has been well received. So thank you.
Thanks, James.
Wow. Thank you everyone for attending today's BlueTech Global Connect. Fascinating conversations as always. I've put the link for a BlueTech Week in the chat box for reference. Our next BlueTech Global Connect will be August 18th, and the topic will be the age of autonomy, swarm, and drone tech. So make sure to attend that one as well. You can find the sign-up page on TMA BlueTech's website. But on behalf of TMA, I want to thank James for moderating, as well as our esteemed speakers, Amos from OLSPS, Shayan with iXblue, and Greg from BlueNalu. We will post a recording of this event on our YouTube page within 1 to 2 days. But if you have any additional questions for our speakers or would like to reach out to them after this call, let us know and we'll facilitate that connection. So thanks again for being a part of today's BlueTech Global Connect, and we'll hopefully see you again on August 18th for the next one. Cheers for now.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt and James. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.